Hello, BookTube. Well, a little belatedly for this busy Sunday, I'm getting around to my library tour, where I'm doing a library tour for 2022. Very glad to see lots of other booktubers jumping on the bandwagon, doing a library tour in 2022. There are a few more I'd like to see. But since I'm vacationing up here in Vermont, I don't have access to my actual library shelves. So I've been looking at scans, thousands and thousands of book cover scans that I have done over the years of books that I no longer have, either in the format that I scan them or any format at all. So I thought we'd go through some more of those today, and we'll start with a mass market paperback back when they were $1.50 of a great Western, a great American Western. This is The Big Sky by A.B. Guthrie. Going to be able to make that out? I don't know if that's going to be. Yeah, that's good enough. That's good enough. This is a very conscious attempt to write the popcorn genre of the Western as a serious work of literature. A few of those, we saw one the other day on one of these library tours, and this is another one. This is a big, sprawling story of three brutal, feral men, but really only one. There's a main character among those three. They are murderers, they're fur trappers, they're outcasts from society, usually voluntary outcasts from society. They sort of roam around in the big, uncarpeted territory of the American West of a century and a half ago. And there's no one to like in this book. And there are a couple of tinny bits of writing. I don't think the author's goal to make this high literature actually works. Because I think for that you need a little bit more than what's going on here. But the main portrait, the portrait of the main one of those three men, is pretty effective. It will stick with you for a long time, except I didn't keep that copy. I believe that The Big Sky either was included in the Library of America Anthology of American Westerns, or is about to be included it will be included in the next volume. And I will certainly see it again, either in an ebook or in some other format, because it got printed a lot. Then this next one is by Jeffrey Minot, and this is Birdscapes, Birds in Our Imagination and Experience. A very strange book that is one part historical inquiry and one part social or psychological inquiry. I mean, it obviously can't get away from how birds have been portrayed and noticed in America, in human artistic endeavors, poetry, carving, painting, whatnot. But on the other hand, it tries to get at what is the DNA of that portrayal, of those portrayals. How have humans thought about birds? So on the one hand, a much more ambitious book about birds than most of the ones that I see. I've read thousands of books about birds, and I still keep thinking about this one. I think this was an academic press publication, Yale or Princeton or something like that, but I don't have it anymore. I got rid of it, probably to an ardent birder. Then we have John Shirley. This is urban fantasy. This is bleak history. About a young man who has superpowers. It's standard. Those of you who know urban fantasy, it's the city and it's grit and grime and the crime zone and corrupt police and the mafia and whatnot. But in the midst of all that, overlaid on that is the fantasy elements that you usually get in epic fantasies in an agrarian pre-industrial society, right? The most advanced society in Lord of the Rings is a water wheel of some kind, and that's usually how it stays. The genres have broken down to think that advanced technology really isn't compatible with telling an epic fantasy story, and that breakdown has been partially real and partially artificial. Because the best-selling fantasy novels did that, and fantasy authors want to be best-selling fantasy authors, so they do that. But this, I don't usually find urban fantasy convincing, because usually, to me, it seems that if you follow through the implications of what's in the book, the urban part wouldn't happen anymore, or wouldn't look anything like it does. But this one I remember liking. I remember this was a convincing job, and I may not be able to say about this that I got rid of the original. It could be that I had an ebook of this. I don't remember ever reading this in a physical copy. I think I got this as an ebook, which means that lurking on some device, it might still exist. Then we have Alan Gall. This is his book Brandeis of Boston, a biography of Supreme Court Justice Brandeis. And Brandeis has been the subject of many biographies, and this is a terrific one that I've had go through my hands almost all, I think, of all of those other major biographies, but this is the one I wish that I had kept. This is the one I wish I had, and I will see it again. It will certainly turn up at the Branwell bookstop. Um, then we have, oh, wow, look at this. Okay, I don't think this looks like this anymore. This is a novel by Doug Martin, and this is Branwell. I don't know if you can make out the title there, and as you could be able to tell from the title, this is about the other Bronte sibling. We know the Bronte sisters very well, but they had a brother, Branwell, and he looked, if you look at, for instance, Barker's enormous 1,000-page biography of the Bronte family, you get the strong feeling, or if a lot of you will also have read Daphne du Maurier's book on Branwell Bronte, which is terrific. I wish I had a copy of that as well. But when you read about their history and the way they all wove imaginary worlds together and wrote poetry together and talked together and had it was clear that the portrait of the portion of genius was about equal in all four. So it makes the imagination just real. What we might have got from Branwell had he lived. But instead, he had a short, dissipated life, and it ended quickly, and it left lots of mysteries behind. There are a couple of those mysteries that come to the fore in this book. Why did he leave the job that he had? Was it a simple answer, just drunkenness? Was it a slightly more complex answer, which is that his employer did not like the relationship that seemed to be developing between Branwell and the employer's wife? Or was it even more complex than that, and maybe a little more transgressive? This book is beautifully done, beautifully written. Don't know why I got rid of it, but I will find it again. Okay, all right. Well, this next book is not beautifully done. This is by J.T. Edson, and it's called Bunduki. That is a Michael Whelan cover there. You're never going to guess, but this is actually a Tarzan ripoff. Only unlike a lot of this was an old Daw yellow spine mass market that I scanned here. I had it once upon a time. Unlike a lot of Tarzan ripoffs, I believe this one had, at least at the beginning, the nodding approval of the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. And also in a complex, when you're talking about Tarzan pastiche fiction, you really can't get away from the science fiction author Jose Felipe Farmer. And I think that some of the elements of this story also had his approval. It's been so long since I read this book or read about it that the details may be murky. The book itself was awful, just awful, just horrible. Maybe because of that, I think that soon there were more Bunduki books. I've only ever read this first one. I would love to find them all if they're all as cheesy and bad as this one. But I think that approval was withdrawn. After a while, I think that approval, I don't think they were all approved by the Burroughs estate. Then we have Peter Ward. This is Call of the Distant Mammoths, Why the Ice Age Mammals Disappeared. This is all about, it's about cycles of extinction just in general. There's a very, very, very good section in this book on the extinction of the dinosaurs. But it mainly involves the Pleistocene extinction, and this book is a few years old, probably 20 years old, so I don't know how many archaeological discoveries, how many paleontological discoveries have been made since then to overset this. And I have, when it comes to an author putting forth his own opinions on what caused gigantic, massive, charismatic megafauna to disappear all over the world, pretty much at the same time, in the last great extinction before the one we're living through now, he's going to have his theories, and I have mine. I think you can track, the current big theory is climate change. I think it's that you can track that extinction far more closely to Homo sapiens. I think they are a far more likely example. If we have to pin just one example, I think they're a far more likely example of why everything died off. I think it pretty much shows in gigantic charnel pits, but I'm certainly willing to read books on other things, and this is I recall it being really lively done. Okay, I might find a copy of this next one somewhere. This is written by Martin Waddell, and it's got wonderful art by Barbara Firth, and it's Can't You Sleep, Little Bear? It's a kid's book about a parent bear. They're in a cozy cave, and little bear can't sleep. Little bear just can't sleep. And wants to be told a story over and over again, a bigger and bigger story, and finally, you page through. It's beautifully done. It's one of those kids' books that is an immediate classic. You just want to keep it and read it forever. You, as an adult, want to keep it and read it forever. Eventually, Big Bear decides there's only one thing that will get you to settle down, and that's to show you the biggest story of all, which is the world. And it's delightful, absolutely delightful. Probably the reason that I got rid of the copy that I had, was because I know over the years, I have, periodically known people, friends of mine, who had children. And new children's books, are obscenely expensive. So usually what I have done when I knew that, I don't know nothing about taking care of no children, but I know that if I go to a charity shop or even the Brattle Bookshop, I know that I can get 50 books for $50 and just mail them, and that's a godsend. These things are going to be torn to shreds anyway, so the less money they cost the parents, who have lots of other expenses, the better. I think that's probably where this went, but I cannot recommend it strongly enough. Okay, then we have another great American novel. Maybe not of the same caliber as Far Tortuga, or a great novel of the second half of the 20th century, but certainly up there. Certainly up there. A serious novel. I don't know if it's still in print. I know that it's had many reprints. This was the Vintage Contemporaries reprint, the same one that we saw for that copy of Far Tortuga. So maybe I got them at the same time. This is Theodore Wiesner's book, The Car Thief. A little bit ineptly scanned here. This is an older cover. I know it wouldn't look like this anymore. It's the story, a fairly brutal story. In fact, it bears some parallels with The Big Sky in a way. It's the brutal story of a teenage boy who is always on the north side of the law, and he steals cars, but he does lots of other things that are wrong too. And he's also, his one redeeming human quality, his two redeeming human qualities are his human attachments. He's attached to his father, his single father, who's the same way. His father is no more a saved individual than he is, and he's also attached to a pretty girl. And the writing's beautiful. The novel just descends and descends and descends until finally there are a couple of final scenes in this thing that no one who's read it will forget. Those of you who have read this, God, I'd love to know how many of you have read The Car Thief. I'd love to know how many, but there are a couple of bits at the end of this that you will just never forget. This is not one of those books that just sort of peters out. Okay, then this next one is the first book in an epic fantasy series that I don't have anymore. Kind of wish I did. This is by J.V. Jones, and the first book, the series is called Swords of Shadows, and this is book 1, A Cavern of Black Ice. And this is every bit of stereotype that you could imagine. Dark ones, plural, instead of a dark one, rising. Long-held prophecies about people that can fight back the darkness. In this case, 2 chosen ones instead of 1. All sorts of minions of darkness that fight for and obey that darkness without any distinctive reason to do so. And also a band, a ragtag community, one might even say a fellowship of people who want to stop it. You take all those elements together. I mean, I knew all those elements going into this thing, and your heart just sinks because you think, how tired is this going to be? But Jones is really good as a writer. This is really good writing, really good characters being drawn here, so that you don't mind. I, myself, don't dismiss those kinds of books just because epic fantasy has such a rigid corset of requirements. If you do it well, whether it's action scenes or magic or world building or, in this case, characters, then I don't mind. I don't mind at all. And I remember reading this and liking it. And I don't know if Swords of Shadows, the series, actually went on. I know I never read any more than this one book, and I'd love to read it again. And then we'll finish up with a book by Marie Wynne called Central Park in the Dark. A book about what animals come out in human spaces after dark. In Central Park, those of you who don't know, Central Park in New York City is vast. And there are sections of it, not as many as you might think, but there are sections of it where if you're there in those sections and night falls, you have no idea that a city is nearby. And neither do the animals. And a lot of them, even the ones that know that there's a city nearby, they know perfectly well that most humans aren't going to be in that area. I have a smaller version of that right near Hyde Cottage. I have a big arboretum / wildlands and wood that's right near Hyde Cottage. And it not only it, but also I have two rather old, ornate Victorian era cemeteries that sprawl on for miles of landscape. They're not just flat grounds of tombstones. There are lakes and trees and bushes and all sorts of wild areas all over them. I have areas like that probably in 3 different places within 5 minutes of my front door back at Hyde Cottage. And they all get reclaimed by animals at night. Those are the first places that, for instance, the foxes and coyotes go to colonize, far away from very tempting human trash, but where they know that they won't be pursued. The animals in Central Park know that they're not going to have people gawking at them. They're not going to have photos taken of them. They're not going to have rocks thrown at them by children. They're not going to have anything like that at night. And so there's a flourishing ecosystem. I have spent a night in Central Park, and I can attest it was a wild experience. It was neat. You knew right away. It felt like you had changed from a civilized space to a wild space. So I highly recommend this, and you'd think if I highly recommend it, I would still have a copy, but I don't. But anyway, that's the Library of the Lost for today. We will just keep barreling along. I've got a million of these things to make do until we get back to my own shelves. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.